Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 186, Computer Graphics with Adobe Illustrator for the spring semester 2022. Today, we'll be finishing up Lesson 7. For those of you who are using an older version of the textbook, it's probably Lesson 6, and it covers the use of the pen tool. Working with a curvature tool in the newer textbook is one of the latest iterations of Illustrator, and is recently been added to the tutorials. We're going to finish it, and in this particular version, they have a swan for us, and they have added quite a few elements. So if I turn off the wing, they've already done that for us. We turn off the head, they've already done that for us. If we look at the artwork, that's what we will be doing. Okay. And if we look at the bird template, that's in there as well. That's what we want to see. Okay. And when you're done, you turn it off. The background too, they've already done the little swirls in the water and that sort of thing for us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these back on since this is the finished product. Okay. And we're going to switch over here to the start file. And what they have provided for us is sort of like a connect the dots. You know, when you go to a Denny's restaurant and to keep the kids from fidgeting, they have a paper placemat, and on one side, you connect the dots to reveal, when kid is done, to reveal some sort of simple little illustration. Well, that's pretty much what we're doing here. But if you recall, what I was saying earlier is that one of the keys to using both the pen tool and the curvature tool is to use as few points as possible. You'll get much cleaner and more elegant shapes. For some of you, I may have noted in your mask assignment, and I was pretty forgiving for it, that, you know, I thought that perhaps you could refine your line work and be a little bit more precise. I'm going to turn off the template here. Well, this is what I'm talking about here. When you look at this swan, you'll notice how at the juncture of both of these paths that they meet perfectly, that the curves are nice and smooth and elegant. They're pristine. For this program, that's really the direction that you should be headed. If you want to do something that's a little bit freer, a little bit more open-ended, a little bit more artistic, or something akin to doing it with traditional textures, traditional media, then instead of using the pen tool or even the curvature tool, you'll probably want to use the brush tool. And you can create some really beautiful illustrations with those. You'll wind up with a ton of strokes behind the illustration, but it will give you a much more, a much softer look, one that looks like it was done more with traditional media rather than something that was done with pen and ink. Okay, so this is a good example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go back to the start file. And let's begin. Now, you can start anywhere in this path. They chose to start at the bottom. That's okay. It really is not important. But what you have to remember, you have to either go clockwise or counterclockwise. You can't jump around. If you discover in the middle of this, and I may discover in the middle of mine, that I'm not particularly happy with the placement of an anchor point or using the handle for the curvature handle, that I want to refine it, continue to go all the way around, close the path, and then come back with the direct selection tool and start, begin at your starting point and go around it again and make adjustments as needed. Typically, I start with the anchor point and move it into position and nudge it just a little bit. And then I come back with the curvature handle and tweak it a little bit until it matches the underlying drawing. And again, as I mentioned on Tuesday, this is pretty typical for using the pen tool. It's not it's usually used for refining an existing drawing. So if you have in one of your future assignments a drawing that you have done yourself, you'll put it in the background, turn it into a template, make sure that it's maybe 50% opacity or so, or even less. And then you'll use the pen tool or the curvature tool on top of it to refine it. And then when you're done, you'll turn off the background and you'll be done with it. Okay. This process or procedure is very typical to the way illustrators worked years ago before Adobe Illustrator was on the scene, before anyone really used computer graphics. You would start with a really soft, maybe a blue pencil that was traditionally called a non-repro blue pencil, and do a soft sketch. And then the person on top of it, who maybe was down the pecking order, would work with a pen on top of it and refine it on an overlay. Well, this puts it all into one file. You don't have to separate one from the other. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the pen tool, and I'm going to tear it off. So we can add points, we can subtract points, and I can change the curvature of, or create a curved corner or anchor point, or a sharp angled anchor point. So what I'm going to do is start down here and make sure that I have the correct layer selected, which is artwork. Make sure that it's visible, that it's not locked. Okay. And with the pen tool, if you have another layer selected that is locked, you're going to get that little symbol with a pencil with a little crossed out circle on it. That means you can't draw on that. So that's kind of a quick indication that you need to look at layers and make the necessary changes here. So I'm going to go back to artwork, make sure that the correct layer is selected. And this also, by the way, is a good way for breaking down your artwork and using multiple layers. It really works pretty nicely. Okie doke. So let's begin. I'm going to go ahead with a pen tool. And as I said, I don't like looking at the pen nib, so I'm going to put caps lock on. And it gives me the little cross instead. If the smart guides are driving you crazy, as they are in this instance, usually I like having them visible, but I'm going to go to view, and where it says smart guides, I'm going to temporarily turn them off. And in the future, if you want them back, Command U will bring them back. The other thing that you might look at too under view is that I don't want it to be snap to grid or anything like that. So where it says snap to grid, snap the pixel, snap the point, snap the glyph, I don't want any of those selected. So it allows me to move around a little bit more freely. So they've indicated to us where they want anchor points, where we are to bring in the curvature handles, and to use them as I demonstrated on Tuesday. So I'm going to begin by clicking and dragging, because I know the path ahead of me is curved. Then I'm going to go to point B, and notice that it starts to curve, but I want it to follow the curvature of the underlying path a little bit more accurately. So I pull it up to the yellow dot. But you'll notice that if I want to go to the next point, it's going to curve it. I don't want it to curve. I want it to come to a corner point. So what I need to do is I need to hold down the Option or Alt key, click on that curvature handle, and so to the red dot, and now nicely. And okay, let me start again. So I'm going to make sure that I'm recording. So it is being recorded. I'm going to go back several steps. How much of this have you missed? Everything that I've said? Yes, no? Okay, well, I'm going to continue here. So about 10 or 15 seconds, I think what happened 10 or 15 seconds ago is that I lost the connection, and it was just spinning on my part and it had to reconnect. So there's going to be a lag in the video here. So if you choose to watch it at a later day. So let's keep going here. I'll continue again. So using the pen tool, I'm going to click and drag to pull out the curvature handle here, or tangent handle, or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go to point B. It's already starting to curve, but you can see that I need to click and drag. And when you're doing it yourself, you want to click and drag and move your mouse about until it matches the underlying path that you've created for yourself. Now you'll notice that it comes to an abrupt point. So what I want to do is hold down the Option or the Alt key, depending on what platform you're working on. And I want to move it down here so that those curvature handles are now disengaged. Now what I can do is I can click here, and just a quick click. Now what I want to do is I want to, if I move up again, I don't want it to go in a straight line. I want it to curve again. So I hold down the Option or Alt key again, move over the anchor point, and I click and I drag to move it to the red point. Now I can come up here and you can see that it's starting to curve a little bit, but I need to click and drag once again, pull it up. Okay. Now what I can do is I can hold down the Option or Alt key and click to pull that off. And now I do want a straight line. Okay, I click, and I don't want that to curve. I just want it to be straight. So I'm going to undo, bring it back, click on it. And now I can come back here and hold down the Option or Alt key and click and drag to pull out that tangent handle. I don't want it to be curved. And now I can go over to F. Notice it wants to curve to the left, but as soon as I click on F, and I click and I drag, it's now going in the opposite direction. If I want it to go in the same direction, I move the curvature handle down. If I want it to go in the opposite direction, I move it up. Okay, so we're getting a nice smooth curve here. And they've done a pretty darn good job here in minimizing the number of anchor points that we need to create this one. I could add an anchor point at the top here where my cursor is, but if it's unnecessary, don't. You'll get much better results. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag down here and pull it up until it matches. That looks good. Now notice that it's starting to cover up the interior. So I want to make sure that the fill is selected to none. And then later on, if I want to add a fill and make it white, I can. Okay. So as you're drawing, you want to make sure that you don't have a fill so that your underdrawing remains visible. Now I can hold down the Option or Alt key, click on that anchor point to remove the curvature handle, and I can click here. Okay, because it's going to come to a sharp corner. And then we're going to add an anchor point at the end to curve it and to make it fit underneath his beak or her beak, whichever, their beak, its beak. So now what I want to do is I want to click, and then I want to hold down the Option or Alt key. And then I want to click and drag to pull out that tangent handle or curvature handle. And now I can come back here and I can click and I can drag to here until it matches. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here. Let's see how this works now. So I click and I drag like so. Mine isn't matching theirs, and that's okay. I want it to match the underlying curve. So I'm going to pull it down here. We're going to come back and we're going to adjust it. Notice how it's fitting outside. But now what I want to do is I want to go back once I've selected point J. So this is a good example of adjusting the curve after the fact that you decided, okay, this isn't working for me. So what I need to do is just finish the path, come over A, or a point where I started. You see the little circle in the lower right-hand corner, and click and drag until it matches the curve underneath. So what I can do is just like so, until it matches, and I'm set to go. So now that it's a closed path, I can come back with the direct selection tool. I can select any one anchor point. And if I want to pull this down like so, notice that it's fitting a little bit better in that top end. So what I would normally do is I would decide, I would go around, zoom in on my drawing to make sure that I've followed the path accurately. And if I need to make adjustments, just do it, go around clockwise and go point by point. If I need to add an anchor point, add one. If I need to remove one, remove one. And again, I can just, click on these, click on the anchor point first, the little handle pops out, and I can go ahead now and again, continue to tweak it. And you're not restricted in any way as to how much you can or can't tweak these points. You can edit these indefinitely. Okay. Or, as much as you want, let's put it that way. And I've arranged them and organized them and drawn them pretty accurately. I'm pretty happy with it overall. But now what I want to do is I want to go ahead here and I want to curve this so that it fits underneath the swan's head. I could have done that from the beginning, but instead what I can do is I can either add an anchor point like so. I can click here and I can pull it. So now I've added it using the direct selection tool. I can now pull on that and notice that it's not curved at all. And now what I would have to do is I either need to pull in here to make it nice and curved, that little widget inside that. That's not a bad way to go. Or what I can do is I can use the curvature tool. This would be another good tool, and click on here and click and pull it out and double click. And that curves it very nicely. Come on. There we go. So now I can go ahead, and that works pretty well. If I and we can, stretch it a little bit further, like so. I'm not sure where it's supposed to meet in here, but we can, tinker with it a little bit until it matches nicely. And you can futz with it all you like. And then I, recommend zooming in so you can see how accurately you've drawn the whole thing. And again, as I said, it's really kind of critical that you draw these pretty accurately, unless you're going for a really loose look. And then I would really make it loose, not kind of loose, but really, really loose. If it's somewhere in between, as I've seen with some of your drawings, it looks like you really were indecisive about what you wanted to do with your drawing, or maybe you hadn't completely mastered the tools yet in order to get the drawing to do what you want. Okay. So we've only used a half an hour, but now what I can do is I can go back to the selection tool. I can turn off doesn't match exactly the way it should. So I can either move the wing, or I and you see how you want it to fit, like so. Let's again. How that's happening. I don't want that. I want to make sure that this whole wing is selected. So I'm going to come in here. I don't want just the individual parts. I want the whole wing selected. There we go. Now, if I select individual parts, then I have problems. So now I can come up here, and if I need to, I can move it with the arrow key. And because I am online now with all of you, this is kind of herky-jerky on my end. There we go. I'm cutting in and out. Okay, I'm sorry. I was having problems with this a little bit earlier today, this afternoon. It has to do with my internet connection. So, any better now or no? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this in size a little bit. Move it up just a little bit. And again, make sure that the all the parts fit really nicely. Deselect. If I wanted to, at the very end, make sure that the wing and the swan itself were combined together, I would select them both and group them. That wouldn't be a bad idea, so that they would in the future work as a unit. Or I could go back with the group selection tool or the direct selection tool and manipulate them independently of one another. So now I can go ahead and I can turn on the background, make sure that the template is turned off. And let's go ahead and I need to come back to this shape. And I need to go back to the fill over here and fill it with white. And overall, it's looking pretty good. Okay. We got the head, and we can lock all these parts if we want. Actually, I'm not going to lock the head. I do want to select, and as I said, probably what I would do for myself is that I would select the head, select the body, and select the wing and group them together. So there you have the pen tool. As I mentioned on Tuesday, for many, many years, the pen tool was Illustrator. If you didn't know how to use the pen tool, you didn't know how to use Adobe Illustrator. But since they've added other tools like the curvature tool, but even before the curvature tool, by adding the shape builder tool and by adding the shape width or the path width tool, it made it less and less necessary to master the pen tool. Still, if you plan on using Illustrator a lot, I would use it and use it and use it until you've mastered it. And then the other tools are less complicated to learn to use. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover today. That's it. Unless you guys have questions about the Tokidoki assignment, I can talk about that some more if you'd like. We can go back and we can look at samples again of student work, or maybe better yet, I can go back here and I'm just going to do a Zoom, or not a Zoom, a Google search and look at Skateboard Decks. In recent years, Skateboard Decks have become, I mean, they can go two ways, but there's also been a way that skateboards can become more decorative and not meant for practical use. I'm going to put in here Skateboard Decks by famous artists. Now, did the famous artists do them? No. I mean, there's some by Andy Warhol, there's some by a whole bunch of different artists. So let's look and see if we have some here. And we are looking at the images. Well, this would be a good example. I mean, Van Gogh did not do a skateboard deck. Okay, but this is a nice interpretation of his work and how it's presented as a diptych that you would display on a wall. It happens to be on a floor, but you know, it would display it on a wall and shown in halves. And if you look at examples of my students' work from previous semesters, you can see that probably one of the best ones is the triptych. that was created. So that's a nice way to go. They can be really complicated. They can be, graphically strong or more illustrative. They can go in so many different ways. I encourage you to do your own search here. This is kind of blurry, but it's, no, it's coming into focus, but this is really very nice. These are nice. They're all, separate, independent of one another. But the challenge with the skateboard deck typically is to work with a vertical format, a thin vertical format. So the question here is, do you have to make your own skateboard decks? Well, answer to that is no, you don't. In my handouts, I provided a skateboard template, but we can also look and do a simple Google search and put in skateboard can't type templates. There you go. Blank skateboard template. All right. And the images pop up. There you go. Tons of examples here. And just remember, you don't need to worry about the finish size because we are not having them printed. You just need to worry about the shape of them and for them to fit 3 of them on 11 by 17 format, either horizontally or vertically. And then if you wish to include a background, you can. Here is the kind of tongue depressor type that is probably the most common. Then when you see it like so, just right click on it and copy the image or download it or save image as, put it in the background of your file. And then if you want to create 3 artboards, you can, or 2 artboards, and you can work on them independently. You can do that. But this will give you, you'll put this template that you've saved in the background and use it as a guide, just the same way as Simone did on Tuesday. Does that make sense? And you can see you can use that shape for everything. I don't know how many of you are into skateboards, but there's lots of templates for different shapes, but that's the most common one. So here's one for this shape. I've seen many others too. So let's look at blank skateboard templates and see if we can't find some more. No, it's coming up the same. You just have to scroll through here and find them. Here's a good one. Okay, so this would be a good one to use. Here's a skateboard deck that you could go ahead. Yeah, the question is, you have to make your own design. Now, Simone had a whole variety of images from which to choose because he had designed those. So he already had a library of images to include on his skateboard. You're going to have to do the same. You don't have to create as expansive a library as he did, but you may want to make some preliminary sketches on a napkin or something and decide for yourself, how you want to arrive at it, and then go back in and, what your overall design is going to look like, and then come back and create whatever images you need, refine them as separate elements, and then place them in that template. Does that make sense? Okay. How about for the rest of you? You're okay with that? Okay, I hope it's a fun assignment. Again, it has commercial applications. And that's generally how I teach my classes, because for the most part, is Illustrator, Photoshop, to learn the basics in Photoshop anyway, are usually applied by commercial artists. Later on, when you've kind of mastered the tools in Photoshop, then it can be used by photographers. It can also be used by fine artists to create collages, different, more experimental artworks. And the same could be true for Illustrator, but generally Illustrator is used mostly by commercial artists. So those are the kinds of projects that I've designed over the years to make them more commercially viable. So if you're going in that direction and you wish to be a commercial artist or graphic designer, then these would be good examples to show prospective clients. No, you need to do, if you do only 2 skateboard decks like one of my students did, it needs to be pretty detailed. But for the most part, the kind of skateboard decks that I see by most students, you need to do three decks. And don't forget, you need to incorporate type into each of them. Even if it's just, if you can create a logo for yourself and place that on there, that would be adequate. But if you do use type, there's a variety of ways of making it fairly illustrative. And probably the next week or so, we'll be doing a lesson that utilizes typography. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do with type in Illustrator that you can't do with Photoshop or any other program. It's a very powerful tool for designing logos, for designing marks of any kind. So for those of you who have already had a typography class or the graphic design class, then that's something that you guys might want to consider. Okay. Well, that's it for today. Thank you guys for showing up. As I said, I'll be around Tuesday afternoon, but I probably will not be here Thursday afternoon. So we'll just meet have one session next week. Okay. So that's it. I'm going to stop recording and I'll say goodbye.